Cancel culture takes a big L. The press tries and fails to hype a crisis into existence over Dave Chappelle's new Netflix special. First, there were the numbers. Over the course of the last week, news commentators predicted a huge demonstration of Netflix's employees in protest of comedian Dave Chappelle's The Closer special, with Yahoo typifying coverage. Reports say that 1,000 Netflix employees, nearly 10% of the company's workforce, they wrote, are planning an October 20th walkout to protest the Chappelle special. The Hollywood Reporter did say at least 1,000 were planning on participating in a virtual walkout, whatever that is, but noted the story first came out in The Verge, which talked about a company-wide demonstration. Others followed, mostly without any hint that any of the reporters involved talked to anyone at Netflix but the demonstration's organizers. Nobody checked, because everyone liked the narrative as was. As a result, at least 1,000 became gospel, via headlines like Gizmodo's 1,000 Netflix employees are reportedly planning walkout to protest new Chappelle special, or The Independent inviting us to watch live as more than 1,000 Netflix employees are set to walk out of their jobs on Wednesday. By this Wednesday, October 20th, the day of the planned walkout, the story became hundreds of Netflix employees and supporters are expected to show up, CNN. Then, as the event stated, it became hundreds of protesters stood in solidarity with Netflix's employees, per the Daily Beast, for instance. Then NBC told us hundreds rally outside Netflix, where protesting employees who lined up outside were met with roaring applause. How many employees walked out? Not one news organization put the real number in a headline, and only a few had the guts to even tweet that the actual protest was reduced in the end to the famed Arrested Development meme. The New York Times. Dozens of Netflix employees walked out of a Los Angeles office building on Wednesday, protesting Dave Chappelle's recent stand-up special. They carried signs that read, "Team Trans, and transphobia is not a joke." The Arrested Development meme. There are dozens of us. Dozens! Even the op-ed wrap-ups couldn't avoid sounding like parodies, with the Washington Post talking about the crowd of dozens gathered outside the company's West Hollywood offices being evidence that the popularity of a comedian whose show already gained over 10 million views was colliding with a growing movement to protect the rights of transgender people. How a comedy set could be a violation of the rights of transgender people was not explained, of course. Coverage across the board was ridiculously one-sided, with story after story quoting nothing but activists and woke Twitter personalities denouncing Chappelle's alleged jokes. Journalists not only felt no responsibility to accurately gauge how many protesters might turn up, or to balance out the outraged tweets with any of the millions of commenters who felt differently, or indifferently, as it were. They routinely mischaracterized the show's content. For instance, Chappelle was regularly accused of having defended the rapper DaBaby in the special, an example being New York Times guest columnist Roxane Gay, writing, "One of the strangest but most telling moments in The Closer is when Mr. Chappelle defends DaBaby, a rapper in the news, for making pretty egregious homophobic remarks. You have to be high or having a psychotic episode to hear defending DaBaby in The Closer." For those who don't know the story, I didn't, DaBaby, described by Chappelle as the #1 streaming artist until a couple of weeks ago, went on stage in a concert in Florida in July and went on a half-coherent rant. He told fellas in the crowd, "If you ain't sucking in the parking lot, put your cell phones up." Some in the crowd went along. Now, I go hard in the paint, but even I saw that shit and was like, "God damn, DaBaby," was Chappelle's first comment. Then he went on, "Can't do that. Can't do that. But I do believe, and I'll make this point later, that the kid made a very egregious mistake. I will acknowledge that. But, a lot of the LGBTQ community doesn't know DaBaby's history. He's a wild guy. He once shot a N-word and killed him in Walmart. Oh, this is true. Google it. DaBaby shot and killed a N-word in Walmart in North Carolina. Nothing bad happened to his career. Do you see where I'm going with this? In our country, you can shoot and kill a N-word but you better not hurt a gay person's feelings. You can definitely infer from that bit that Dave Chappelle does, in fact, think it's worse to shoot and kill a person than to make homophobic remarks. That regularly came out translated in op-ed pages as defending DaBaby. Such blithely insane, proudly dishonest mischaracterizations have become a regular feature of national media commentary, and Chappelle mocks the habit repeatedly in The Closer. To the delight of audiences around the world, it might behoove press people to notice. However, that's not where he was going with the DaBaby bit. Chappelle became a star in the first place in part thanks to his extraordinary talent for diving into the most uncomfortable, enraging material and emerging with a routine that forces even the most dug-in, reluctant, in-denial audiences to see something they otherwise wouldn't. Often he used an approach that was a lot more genial and forgiving than his audience deserved. I know I was in awe. Years ago, I wrote a book called The Divide that searched for ways to show affluent white readers, especially, that America has two different justice systems. One chapter told of a black bus driver repeatedly arrested and fined for obstructing pedestrian traffic. Literally, for standing on the sidewalk outside his home. That story appeared side by side with the tale of 5 rich white guys who were found guilty of defrauding stockholders out of $600 million, but allowed to remain free pending appeal because a judge was moved by character testimonials like, he was a God-fearing family man who refuses even to swear, drink, or jaywalk. Guidelines technically allowed the judge to impose life sentences in the latter case, and prosecutors only asked for 7 years. So what did they get in the end? Nothing. An appeals court ruled that in their crisis-era trial, the rich white dudes had been prejudicially cast as causing an economic downturn that has affected every family in America. I spent 3 years and hundreds of pages writing that book. Chappelle did the whole thing a lot better in just over 6 minutes, in Tron Carter's Law and Order. I don't know a white person who didn't find that sketch funny, but you can still watch the real punchline play out any day of the week in any municipal courtroom in America, and it's far less funny there. Chappelle probably did more to get upper-class white people to grasp the insanity of the American justice system and push the country toward things like bail and sentencing reform, with one inspired shot of a fictional white suspect looking toward a jury of his peers. In the show, a jury box full of grimacing black dudes, then 1,000 earnest activists. White audiences couldn't get enough of laughing at institutional racism as described in Chappelle's show, but The Closer is something different. Here, we're not talking about meathead cops who shoot your dog, or fat cat white-collar lawyers, congressmen, and federal investigators who kiss the asses of corporate thieves. As I also found out, everyone hates those people, so you can beat on them all you want. They long ago stopped being taboo targets. The Closer goes after racism we're not yet allowed to discuss. 15 plus years ago, when Chappelle's show was taking the entertainment world by storm, we didn't yet live in a world where upper-class white people had completed their Apollo 11 mission to enlightenment and planted a flag in racism and discrimination as their exclusive properties. Chappelle had to be freaked out in the early 2000s to look out at packed house after packed house of white faces roaring at his jokes and hurling money at him. Yeah, we're racist. We really are. More. Imagine what he thought when he took time off and returned to find the exact crowd of upscale liberals had decided to cut him out of the deal and make an industry out of celebrating their own prejudices. They didn't just laugh a little in their spare time to Dave Chappelle's jokes now. They cranked out thousands of books and movies and TV shows on the theme. They took baths in their own shame via books like White Fragility, became credentialed experts in it, gave themselves degrees in its study. Chappelle walked away from $50 million years ago, probably in part from being freaked out by his own popularity. Now he's resurfaced in a country where an invisible cultural politburo, driven mainly by the same upscale white intellectuals who first made him rich, has decreed racism no laughing matter, a crisis so grave and urgent it can no longer be left to potty-mouth amateurs like him. Moreover, this, thanks, we'll take it from here. Crew identified 497 additional varieties of impermissible prejudice, under which he, Dave Chappelle, is also a bigot. This is the same comic who once went way out of his way to be as gentle as possible in breaking the news to white America that it hadn't exactly left the door to Dr. King's mountaintop all the way open. Now they're going to tell him what bigotry is? Many press accounts characterize The Closer as an exercise in punching down on marginalized groups. Chappelle repeatedly explains an opposite take. Any of you who have ever watched me know that I've never had a problem with transgender people. If you listen to what I'm saying, clearly my problem has always been with white people. I've been arguing with whites my entire career. Just when I thought I had you guys on the ropes, you changed all the rules. Oh yeah? Yeah, motherfucker? Well, I am a girl now, N-word. In another scene, he describes being approached by a white woman who wants to lecture him about misogyny. Sounds to me, she says, like you hate women. He initially replies in civilized intellectual voice, like he actually cares enough to engage. Well, you know what, miss? It's art, he says. You are free to interpret this art however you like, but I can tell you, as the maker of this art, that I don't believe that I feel that way. Flattered, and accustomed to being taken seriously, as all such people are, the woman starts to respond. And she said, well, I think... And I said, shut up, bitch! Shut the f*** up, before I kill you and put you in the trunk. Ain't nobody around here. The whole show is about his ongoing beef with mostly upper-class, mostly white intellectuals, trying to make him take seriously their self-appointed new status as human beings' bigotry police. In a now infamous passage about being a trans-exclusionary radical feminist, TERF, he says, I didn't even know what the fuck that was. Chappelle is like the overwhelming majority of Americans, alternatively mystified and enraged at being scolded for violating a confounding and constantly expanding list of social rules he had no say in writing. To be black and lectured in this way, from one's own former audience no less, has to be doubly infuriating. No wonder he's pissed. Could the jokes in The Closer age badly, a la Eddie Murphy's Delirious, or Tracy Morgan's Born This Way bullshit routine? Maybe. But Chappelle's point is that it's the audience's job to work that out, not a handful of self-appointed moral gatekeepers in the press and on that fake place called Twitter who have been claiming veto power over comedy. After a mega demonstration failed to materialize, news outlets continued the pretense that the company had been pushed to the brink. Article after article described Netflix on the verge of collapse, in a crisis of their own making, as CNN put it, or grappling with a storm on its hands, as the eternally overwrought Daily Beast said, or in a turmoil, as GQ wrote. Turmoil? What actually happened was the general public gave an almost unanimous thumbs up to the show, and the essentially universal condemnation of these media neurotics fell flat as Netflix, whose revenues jumped to $7.4 billion in the third quarter of this year, blew off demands to cancel the show. The press tried to hype a crisis into existence and failed. That's all. Pretentious idiots have essentially banned comedy for half a decade or more now, and the public has decided it wants it back, even if it's tasteless, maybe especially if it's tasteless. Could America finally be demanding its sense of humor back? Thank you for listening to the audio version of this article. For more, go to taibbi.substack.com.